This is Only the Strong Survive, a podcast powered by Kahn Media, where we dive deep into the world of business, leadership, and innovation. I'm your host, Dan Kahn, and I'm honored to have you join us today. So let's get ready to learn some survival skills together. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Only the Strong Survive. I'm your host, Dan Kahn, and today we've got a really great conversation lined up. Joining me today is Matt Stevenson, the president and CEO of Holley, one of the biggest forces in the automotive and performance aftermarket. Holley has evolved from an iconic carburetor company into a massive enthusiast platform spanning EFI, tuning, electronics, suspension, events, digital products, and some of the most recognizable brands in the entire automotive industry. What's especially interesting about Matt's story is that he didn't come up through the automotive channel that most of us in the aftermarket know, engineering and finance. He actually started in marketing and worked his way into operational leadership roles and eventually the CEO seat, leading transformations at companies like Daimler Trucks, Bluebird, and then eventually taking over Holley. Matt, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Dan. It's great to be here this afternoon.
Well, I think our audience is going to be really interested in this. And I think, I want to start by kind of learning more about your path and your story. And then I'm really interested to kind of talk about where you are today with Holley and
Sure.
Where you're trying to go in the future, because as sort of the category and segment leader in our whole industry, I think a lot of everything from other, other brands and competitors to shops and jobbers and car builders, everyone sort of looks to the ship that you're the captain of to say, okay, where is this whole thing going and what's happening? So I think this will be an interesting conversation.
Okay. Yeah. I hope not to disappoint.
Well, let's start at the beginning, Matt. What, how did you get started in business? And when you were kind of coming up, was your goal to work in transportation or what was kind of your goal growing up? What did you want to do?
Yeah. And I'd say, Dan, pretty much from the beginning, I was always interested in cars. I think got that from my father, who worked in the auto industry. And, when it came time to look at colleges, I pretty much had a really narrow list, and they were all associated with cars in some form or fashion. And ended up going to a university in Flint, Michigan, that at the time was GMI, which at one time was General Motors Institute. Now it's Kettering University. And at the same time, always being a gearhead, you think of yourself as mechanical, but I wanted to come up through the marketing and business route. And so I was one of the few business students at that university.
Interesting. And I think I've heard you say before that understanding the customer is foundational to your leadership style. How did marketing play a role in that? And how did that shape kind of your career path?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about it, or GMI or Kettering now, is a co-op university. So that was one of the really interesting things as a foundational element, for this industry in my career, and how I've evolved as a person is, you went 5-year program, you went school on and off every 3 months, and you were working right away in a corporate environment. So I started out doing my co-ops at Mack Trucks. And I started in the strategic marketing planning group, literally understanding what was going on with customer trends through the numbers. And some of my first, internships were developing slides for the CEO to talk about market trends and what was going on in the different consumer or customer segments at that time. So, it just, the customer is everything. And, especially in our business, where we have multiple sets of customers, not only our enthusiast consumers, but also our distribution partners, installers, national retailer partners. And you always got to put yourself into the shoes of what that customer is looking for and how do we best serve them. And, throughout my career, just spent, a lot of time in marketing, I'd say marketing, product planning, sales roles, probably at least the first 15 years before I got into more general management and leadership roles at different divisions and then companies.
And one of the questions I wanted to ask, Matt, is you've got this really, well, I guess rather than me reciting your resume, kind of speed run through the brands you've worked for, because you've worked with some pretty incredible companies.
Yeah. I started off at mentioned Mack Trucks, then in my co-ops, and then worked for the Daimler Truck portfolio. ran their light truck group. At the time, we were associated with the Daimler Chrysler, with the Dodge Group, and we were working on projects there. Mitsubishi Fuso, I also had an opportunity to lead their division in North America. Spent time at Meritor, which is now owned by Cummins, which was a great learning ground of an automotive turnaround coming out of the Great Recession. Then went to Bridgestone, where I had a number of leadership roles, and at that time, Bridgestone was in its own transformation. And again, a lot of great learnings, great bosses there. And then my first journey into really in the consumer world had a departure to run pest control business, the largest or one of the largest in the country at that time, Terminex. And so we had 8,000 teammates across the country. And really, how do you put that consumer first? It's always important, but in a recurring revenue business, that you're trying to keep your customers, making sure they're happy, you're serving them with the right level of service to their expectations. It was really phenomenal, stop, so to speak, in the career to really understand a fast-paced consumer business, both on lead generation, but more importantly on customer service. And then spent some time in the private equity world. And one of the private equities I was working with owned a large stake in Bluebird School Bus, and the CEO was retiring. And then took that role in a very interesting time, hyperinflation, if you want to call it that, coming out of out of the COVID time period, supply chain disruptions, and a company that got in distress quite quickly right before I got there, and we were able to turn that around in about a 2-year turnaround from record losses to record profitability. And a lot of work went involved in that, a lot of intensity. I always joke around that it felt like dog years, just the amount of work that went in and getting that turned around during that just tumultuous time a lot of businesses were going through. And then I got a call about Holley, and always being an auto enthusiast. And candidly, I hadn't followed everything that Holley had been doing over the X number of years and all the amazing brands in our portfolio. And my wife said to me, "Hey, are you going to take a call?" I said, "No." I said, "Well, look, I just put 2 years in turning around this company, and like it's finally on the right track. It's starting to be fun." And she goes, all you do in your spare time is find some ways to play around with cars, and you got a job here that's calling you that you can actually do that for a living. Like, you got to at least hear it out. And so got to meet the board and some of the members of the leadership team, and I was really excited about all the great brands that we have, and it's played out well.
That's really cool. As you're talking about this list of companies, we've worked with a variety of companies over the years, and you talk. I've never worked like with a Bridgestone, but I've worked with some of their competitors, the big tire companies, and big multinationals, and many layers of leadership, and things tend to sort of move very slowly. And certainly the OEMs that we've worked with have operated that way. That is not the experience I've seen from your leadership team at Holley. It seems like you guys are very nimble. You move very quickly. You move very decisively. I'm curious, is that something that's part of your MO? Is that part of your culture that you've built? And how do you, when you come into a company like a Bluebird or now Holley, how do you approach sort of looking at the culture that exists and sort of the decision-making MO that exists, and how do you assess, like, this is what I think needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's I say there's good and bad in what I'm about to say. Like, it's definitely my personality. Like, it's intense, and there really isn't. If it's a 6-speed, Dan, there's really not many gears below 6, and so that's not always a benefit to the team. But I just like to move with a sense of urgency, and I look at how in the roughly 30 years I've been working, how businesses evolved. Even at Daimler and Bridgestone times, they were more nimble. Now, over the years, when I was at certain companies, I saw them become slower and more bureaucratic. But I think ultimately, everyone likes to make an impact, right? And those that move fast, can have a competitive advantage. And so that's how I look at how do we empower the team, and then how are we able to cut the bureaucracy out and have a team that really works closely together and has clear transparency of what the goals are, and then just can get it done.
That makes sense. On a related note, you're known for sort of turning companies around, and also, Holley, and I think hopefully we'll get into this a little bit. Holley is a huge portfolio of brands, but it's also growing, and we've announced a few additions to the Holley portfolio just in the past year. As you walk into businesses and as you're assessing businesses, whether it's to join them as a leader or to acquire them, are there signs that you can read? How do you tell whether a company is healthy, broken, fixable, drifting? What do you look for during your sort of assessment?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is like looking, of course, at the financials, right? And Jesse, our CFO, and I joke around quite a bit. I think I interviewed him 100 times about the different scenarios, about the numbers and what was going on, because you want to make sure the company's in a healthy position, or you can get it in a healthy position, right? And so, thankfully, Holley wasn't the situation I faced at Bluebird, but it was a different kind of transformation, and both two great companies, but very different in terms of the transformation, that was required. And what I, saw at Holley was, the opportunity to really get back to what made these brands great, and that was getting closer to the consumer and empowering our divisions and categories to move more autonomously to serve that consumer or that B2B partner. And so I also looked at operationally, can you make the operations better in the right way by taking out non-value added cost, then invest in the front end of the business to be able to serve that level of whether it's product innovation, customer service, what have you, that or resources that may be required to be that level of service that you want to offer the whatever customer group, to be able to drive that growth. So if you see a well-oiled machine on the back end, but it needs investment on the front end, then you start to think about how you're going to fund this, right? And so what I saw was the opportunity on both sides of the coin to really continue to make Holley a great company by removing those non-value added costs and investing in the business. And that's exactly how it's played out, Dan. I mean, we've taken out a tremendous amount of non-value added costs. And when I say that is just, pure waste. It's just making the operations run better. We brought in some great operational leaders, and we've invested a ton of money in people and leaders and product innovation, sales and marketing to be able to continue this growth.
I bear with me. This is a long question, but having worked in this industry most of my life, I've seen this sort of transition, this kind of arc from mostly founder-led companies to now many of the brands. You walk into like a SEMA show, Central Hall, I would say certainly half, if not more than half, are now either part of a group or a private equity group or something like Holley, which is obviously publicly traded, but some sort of bigger roll-up type scenario. And I can see what you're talking about, because I mean, certainly the founder-led companies, in many cases, I think have positives and negatives, right? On the downside, you've got a founder who this is the way we've always done it, and they're sort of in a groove. In many cases, these were just like a person with an idea in a garage, and they came up with a product and grew a business out of it. And many of these folks don't have sort of business backgrounds. A lot of times they're spending huge amounts of money on whether it's racing or weird passion projects. On the flip side, you have these sort of banner waving sort of evangelists, right? You've got the guy whose name is on the building, who's kind of the champion of what the heart and soul of that company is. As you take the CEO role of what I have to imagine is the largest, group of companies in the industry, because you're 64 or something like that.
Yeah, north of 70. Yeah.
Okay, so over 70 brands. How do you strike that balance? How do you say, okay, we need to sort of cut the fat. We need these things to be profitable. We have shareholders, we have customers, but we also have to kind of preserve the heart and the soul that the customer, the consumer customer, not the shop owner customer, believes in? How do you make it so that guy still wants to slap the sticker on the toolbox?
It's a great question, Dan. And so maybe unpack it into different parts here. So maybe first talk about how we see the industry, and then the structure we put in place, and then now what we're doing to get that founder type mindset into the business. So you know this industry, gosh, as well as anybody. Being an enthusiast myself, I'll say we find ourselves in these tribes, right? In terms of like we like these certain types of vehicles, and some folks like maybe they're into Raptors and they're into Euro cars, or they're into like late '60s muscle cars and they're into that. Like, and so people can be part of multiple tribes, but they're so involved in those platforms, in those forums, or what have you, right? And at the same time, you have these founder-led businesses or these smaller companies. A lot of times they're just in one category. And let's just take exhaust, for example. All they do is live and breathe exhaust. And a lot of times these guys will specialize in a couple of tribes or, areas, and they really know what those customers want in there, right? And they're in one building, they have one team, and whether it's 30 or 50 people, all they do is think about that all day long. There's incredible power in that. That is laser focused. Now, they may have some pet projects and this and that, and, to some of your points, but man, they're in the forums talking about their exhaust on that platform.
Right. And a lot of times, with a couple exceptions, it's usually not even exhaust. It's usually like diesel truck exhaust or like, late model
or
muscle
Euro
exhaust. Right. Exactly. So really a niche.
So it's deep, right? So that's kind of the competitive landscape a lot of the times, right? So when I came into Holley, it was the pendulum was too swung, and there were reasons at the time for being more corporate. But in that, some of the essence, I wouldn't say what was lost. It was starting to get lost of that passion around what made these brands great. The second part I want to talk about is the structure. So when I came in, it was probably one of the most challenging things to devise. I've had to devise, Dan, because usually you get into an organization, it's had a structure that generally worked, may have been off a little bit, but Holley grew really fast. There was a lot of acquisitions from 2015 on, and I'd say the structure was not what it is, what we've put in place today to really run the business with that kind of passion. So, I worked with a team a lot and saying, so how do we structure this? We're in so many categories, so many brands, and traditionally where Holley spent a lot of time focusing is one of the smaller segments of the market, what we call American performance. It's still really important, right? And we love all those enthusiasts in there and all the great products we have. But, and this well, like the truck and off-road space is massive. It's 5X where Holley traditionally focused. And then even the Euro community in import is about 3X. And our safety and racing vertical, and I'm talking total addressable market, is double from where Holley traditionally focused on American performance. So we said, okay, if we're going to grow this to the $1 billion plus company we know it can be, we have to start putting in a division structure to be able to get people focused on these. So what we did is we put an American performance division in, with MSD and Holley and Earls and Mr. Gasket and, those products. Then we set up the truck division with Flowmaster, Bear Brakes, and most of our domestic tuning, because most of that is on trucks. There's Diablo Sport that does some things on cars. And the other thing it was coaching the team is, hey, no structure is perfect, but let's get it directionally right.
Yep.
And because Flowmaster goes on a lot of cars, but where the big growth for Flowmaster is going to be on trucks and SUVs. And then we had Dynan and APR. That was really simple of all the structures because they just do APR and Dynan just do Euro. And we want to grow eventually more into imports. That will probably require additional brands to the portfolio, but that we set up that. And then safety and racing is a global business. We have two amazing teams in Italy, in Stilo and HRX. We had to set up a division leader that really looked after, really motorsports and power sports. It's everything for people that race cars as well as for motorcycles and UTVs, etc. So we set up that division, 4 division structure was the first. And then we said, okay, we can't focus on 70 brands. It's just not realistic. So what are the lifestyle brands? What are the power brands? What are the tertiary and what are the contributing? We love all these brands, but it's just we just got to face the facts. There's only so much time in the day. So where do you spend your energy? And it's on the ones that either are contributing the largest amount of revenue or have the largest growth potential. So of the lifestyle brands, I say this to folks when investors ask me, well, how do you define a lifestyle brand versus a power brand? I say, you know what, lifestyle brands, people tattoo those.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, seriously? I said, yeah, heck yeah. Simpson, APR, Holley, like people are tattooing those. We've seen it at our events.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's just kind of that simple of a definition. And then power brands, are great brands that resonate with enthusiasts and, do significant amount of revenue for us. Tertiary, and you go down the list of contributing in terms of how much revenue and impact and potential they have. So then so you got your 4 divisions. You have more or less 24 brands in the lifestyle and power. So we kind of 80-20 things, right? Spend your energy, 80% of your energy on the things that are going to matter most, right? And then we're working actually right now on continuing to take resources that were more at centers of excellence level. And I should mention this: we had the 4 divisions, but then we want them to have the support around supply chain, manufacturing, of course, finance, HR, and marketing and sales, even to some degree, where we have the shared customers. We want to have those centers of excellence helping our divisions drive growth. What we're actually now doing is the point where we started about kind of these tribes and that passion and the depth of knowledge. We're even moving more resources into divisional marketing. Before, it was more weighted to centralized marketing, or moving to more divisional marketing to get closer to the enthusiasts, be on the forums, understand the trends, promote the specific brands, and really drive that strategy. Versus if you look back 3 years ago, it was more of talking as Holley as a corporation. We want to be an amazing lifestyle platform in all 4 divisions, not just Holley and American Performance. And we got to make sure we're giving the resources for each of those 4 divisions to connect with consumers and our B2B partners. I hope that answers the question of how we kind of broke it down.
It does. And I think you mentioned something at the beginning of your explanation that it's worth exploring, because I say a lot, what we sell is a want, not a need. That's kind of true, right? Like, I mean, if you're if you're at Apex, not SEMA, if you're selling replacement alternators, that's a need. Like, somebody's alternator goes out on their car, they have to replace it. Nobody really needs a, computer ECU reflash or a cold air intake. They want it. But the reality is, you're right. It is, in a weird way, kind of a need because our consumers are almost like addicts. Like, it is a lifestyle, and they're not going to stop being car guys because gas goes up $1 a gallon. They're not going to stop, maybe if some life change happens, then, they have a couple of kids, they might slow things down for a couple of years, but they don't suddenly take up badminton. These are car guys. And so, and there is this sort of thing we have in common in a weird way, almost with like the fashion industry, where it's not just, I want to make this one mod to my car. It's, I'm going to keep making mods every time something new comes out because it's cool. And when the car is sort of complete, most of the car people I know get bored and sell it and start over again. And so for me, the thing that I was most impressed with back in February when I came out to Nashville and Bowling Green to visit with you guys is I walked into your R&D center, and there was a single cab short box Ford F-150 XL up on a lift, and your team was making a Flowmaster exhaust system for it. And to me, what really made me happy when I saw that is, and it's a kind of a semi-derogatory phrase for this type of build, but they call it Mexican GTRs, right? Because you can get a V8 single cab, 4-wheel drive. They're cheap. You can get them for like 30, 32 grand, strip base model. You lower it, you put a supercharger and an exhaust and a tune in it, and suddenly you've got a 600-700
Seven.
horsepower.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you got a serious performance vehicle for
Mm-hmm.
50 grand or something like that that could smack a supercar. The fact that that trend hadn't even really fully taken off on social yet in February, and you guys were already doing R&D to build a system for it, made me thrilled, because I saw that one. Okay, these guys have their finger on the pulse. They are on top of it. They're trying to capture the kind of newness that is so important in our industry, because everybody, they want something when it's hot right now. They don't want to wait 6 months. And so usually those first couple of brands to market with that kind of stuff, every time some new thing pops, I mean, I remember a couple of years ago in OBS trucks and, G-bodies and fourth gen Camaros popped. You guys had a nice fourth gen in your booth at SEMA last year. Like, if you're on it, you're going to get at least some of that business. And if you're the last one to the table, you're not. So it's impressive, because I think a lot of these sort of larger groups tend to sort of slow that down. So I'm curious, do you have within the organization, and I don't know if it's within each of these kind of divisions or at the brand level, who are the people that are out there on those forums you mentioned, on social media, and how are they figuring out, hey, here's the next thing that's coming, we got to get ready for it?
Yeah, so I'd say each of our key categories has folks that are in there, into the forums, on social media, talking with enthusiasts and understanding where the trend's going. I mean, thankfully, we have a ton of enthusiasts in this company. And one of the things we're really big on is getting away from selling pieces and parts. Just being an enthusiast myself, whenever, I get a used vehicle or new vehicle or something, you spend an incredible amount of time trying to find everything for it, right?
Yep.
And we want to make it easy for the enthusiast. And very few companies are able to offer the breadth and depth of product in a various platform. So one of the benefits of this division structure is we task these divisions with what are the key models that you guys want to nail in your plan for 26, 27. Because, the OEs are putting their schedules out. Like, and I'm talking on the new vehicle side. So the truck, Euro folks, like in our teams, they know what's coming down the pipeline. They generally know. I think you get 5 of them in a room for 15 minutes. They're going to tell you what the cool platforms are going to be, right? And just for example, on trucks, Toyota trucks are screaming right now because you had, the new Tundra in 22, the new 4Runner in 24, new Tacoma in 24, new 4Runner in 25. Also, those hadn't seen new platforms in there in 10 years roughly or more in some of those cases, and none of those things are really taking off. Those guys get focused on what is going to be coming in the pipeline we got to get ahead of. And folks like SEMA Garage, we get our own vehicles, but SEMA Garage does a great job of getting those vehicles in early access. And then American Performance is different, right? So American Performance is more of that look back, right, where we talk a lot about peak spending years of the U.S. consumers, 45 to 55. And you walk that back to when those people were in high school, like, that's what's cool. I mean, it's not that hard.
That has always been the recipe, right? Like my dad graduated in 1965, and to this day, he doesn't really care about anything that was built after about 1969. So right. It's whatever you were interested in high school. I mean, I think that's why OBSs and Fox Body Mustangs are popular right now. Because
Fox Body Mustangs, OJ era Broncos, yep. Right? And this is where, like, I saw the other day, like 93 Ford Lightning was going for like $70,000, and I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And so it's fun when we talk about the nostalgia and what moves in that trend on American Performance. And, a lot of the times we get this misconception, American Performance is just old muscle cars. We're not, no. Mm-hmm. Like, our American Performance division is this, it's the window it moves. And so it's these, like the vehicles we just talked about start entering in, SUVs and trucks, and of course cars of that era too. And then the really interesting thing about this, Dan, is there's this layering effect that, I think that our group really understands well is, what our fathers liked. Those vehicles got fixed up. They don't go to the junkyard, right? They're heirlooms. Right. So they stick around. Now, someone may sell it or hand it down to another family member or what have you. But so you have this, you kind of get this layering effect of a long-term demand in there where it was, the cars our fathers like 60s and early 70s. And then now you have the 80s cars in here. Now you have the 90s cars in there. And there people are still buying parts for those. And people ask me all the time, like, you guys can't sell many carburetors, do you? And I'm like, yeah, we sell a boatload of carburetors. And so it's just really interesting to watch those trends. So that's how the guys look at the trends, kind of back to the peak spending years, what was cool when those folks were in high school. And then on the modern truck and off-road and Euro and import, they're looking at, what's really new coming out down the pipeline, being first to market on those platforms. And then on safety and racing, it's really an interesting part of our business because it's the ultimate enthusiast, right? I mean, if you're taking that car out on the track on the motorsport side, like, yeah, you not only probably are wrenching on it, like you're driving it hard. And so again, we want to offer solutions for those customers, gear from head to toe, and we have amazing brands to keep racers safe. We got Stilo, Hans, Simpson, RaceQuip. So we have the proverbial good, better, best, starting at RaceQuip and then Simpson, Stilo. And then, of course, we do motorcycle for the motorcycle enthusiast, helmets there. And there's a lot of fashion involved in that vertical, but also a lot of listening to customers' unmet needs, whether they're driving or riding, and developing, what is that product plan and new features in those products, for next year and beyond. Typically, we're having at least 3-year product plans on some of the categories a bit longer.
Interesting. Well, that leads to another question I had, which is both about product planning and forecasting, and your comment earlier about even kind of whatever the current generation that's in sort of that spending, peak earning potential, peak spending potential, what they wanted in high school, that's what they're buying. It seems like, it was only, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago that, all the talking heads in our industry, including the OEM side, not just aftermarket, were like, oh, it's the end of internal combustion and electric cars are going to be everywhere and driverless cars and autonomy. And it became, I think, fairly clear that maybe outside of a handful of cities, I'm sure the talking heads were saying that stuff. I'm not sure that the actual consumers wanted that. And it seems like there's a shift. It seems like there's also a place for maybe both. I don't mind riding around in a nice late model electric car if someone's going to offer me a ride, but that's not going to be my fun car on a Saturday. When you're leading a company the size and scope of Holley and you're trying to forecast whether product planning or even just kind of looking down the road to say, where are we going to go? Is it just a constant rolling date of, okay, right now we're looking at stuff from the 80s and 90s, and 10 years from now, what'll be the cars that are getting modded? Is there a look at EV? Is there sort of a, hey, we're going to stick with sort of the traditional hard parts business? How do you kind of future-proof a business that is contending with something that has swung so much in the last couple of years in terms of where the current platforms are going?
Yeah, it's a great question, but I think from the macro view of it, Americans have a love affair with cars, right? And in ways, certain countries do around the world, but man, I don't know if there's anything like the love affair we have, and it's, post World War II, that boom, that has just been something that is so Americana.
Mm-hmm.
And, you look at like Ram, I don't know if you saw today, Dan, they launched these new kind of shorter cab, like trucks, and we're trading the email.
Big Hemi motors, they're really cool. Yeah.
Like 777 horsepower. I was like, hell yeah. Like
that is 100% Tim Kuniskis just doing his thing. That guy is a hot rodder. Yeah.
But they started putting V6s, and the enthusiasts and the Ram lovers weren't buying it, right? And so they know the consumer, right? So I think Ford's canceling their EV plans, and GM, I think, has shelved all the Hummer things and everything else. Like, there will be a place for EV, but I think given the nature of the American mindset, given the distance, that this country covers outside of the metro areas, and the lifestyle that people use their vehicles, just very different. Nowhere in the world is 80% of what people buy are trucks and SUVs, right?
Yep.
That's what Americans are buying here. So then relate that to our business. We'd already talked about American performance. We're just really into the 80s and early 90s cars as those look back. So we have at least another 30, 40 years or beyond on that, right? If not more. Then you look at truck and off road, outside of some Rivians, right? There's nothing really going there. Hybridization for sure, but we're still offering performance parts
Yep.
and different things on hybrids. So you just don't see much of an impact there. You get to Euro, we'll see where that goes. On dine-in and APR, we still offer a full suite of products out of engine-related items, but people love their M cars. Those G80, M2, M3, M4s. My goodness, like we sell a lot of components to enthusiasts for those cars, and the same thing for GTIs and Golf Rs. And so we got to see how that enthusiast responds to some of these EV plans that are coming forward. But I think there's a lot of talk about a bifurcation that's happening in these OEMs where they're going to have more of a specific North American platform, and then rest of world, where Western world is being driven a lot by taxation, government regulations versus consumer demand.
That's an interesting point. And you're right about the German car thing. I mean, I look at our team, 30 something people, as a little ecosystem, because we try to only hire car people. And certainly I think the number one category of vehicle our team members buy and modify are mostly probably American trucks. Number two, and it's a close number two, is BMW. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also semi-generational, because like I'm in my late 40s and I'm a pretty hardcore car guy, and I'm willing to tackle big projects, but there are certain things I'm afraid of. I won't go after some of the more hardcore tuning and ECU type stuff. And, the late model Euro stuff scares me a little bit. I'll hire someone to work on a car for me before I'll touch it myself. But I've got employees in their 20s and early 30s that, they grew up in a different world. They grew up with iPhones and technology. That we have team members that'll go buy E46 M3s, and they'll take the subframes out, and they're welding subframes, and they're doing heavy duty suspension mods, and they're buying all these parts. And I mean, the willingness they have to mod these European cars that are super complex, technical, interiors full of airbags, and they are fearless. They don't care. So yeah, it's an interesting generational thing. So I think it's interesting that you guys have a diverse enough portfolio you can service that.
Yeah, and there's also a trend we're seeing, Dan, is you think about, again, let's go back to kind of these generational shifts, the population of the vehicles and stuff. So obviously, the LS community, we're big, right? And we have a ton of enthusiasts that use our components on the LS engine. And of course, that's going to LT, that's going to, Coyote, Gen 3 Hemi, but we're also seeing a large increases in people taking inline six BMWs. And when you think about when you and I grew up, like we didn't know many people that had a BMW.
No.
And
it was kind of a type, like you were kind of a gold chain guy if you had a BMW. You weren't. Yeah.
And so those vehicles are now coming in volume, or have been over the last 20 years, where now there's a lot of inline sixes sitting in junkyards where people are maybe doing an LS swap. They're doing a S58 swap or something on their projects. To your point about this younger generation, we've seen it for quite a while on some of these, Honda engines and things like that. But now we're seeing a lot of swapping going for BMW inline sixes and some of these other powertrains in Euro. So it's a bit like the lines are blurring, that in terms of, they're Euro enthusiasts, but they're acting more like an American performance enthusiast, like in our terminology, who's swapping an LS. So now that they're swapping that inline BMW 6, and they're looking for controllers and different things to make that swap a reality.
That's interesting. And that makes total sense. Matt, you mentioned, to change topics a little bit, you mentioned Holley's sort of significant role in the LS swap world. I would say one of the things Holley does that I think is really interesting is pre-2020, I think most brands in the aftermarket saw event marketing as sort of a thing they have to do, but not something they necessarily want to do. It's expensive. It's time consuming. You've got staff members out on the road, and whether that's consumer facing, B2B, trade shows. I mean, most of the brands I knew pre-2020 kind of had the same attitude. Hey, it's a thing we have to do. It's not something, we particularly like. It's not operationally that efficient, but you have to be out there. And then all of a sudden, everyone gets locked inside for a year or two, and they come out of that going like, everybody just wanted to have experiences. And Holley was already kind of teed up for that. So can you kind of give me your insight now that you're running this huge company with all these brands, and yet you guys are still doing something pretty unique in terms of a kind of not just running a car show or something, but what you've created with LS Fest and what you guys are running across the country is almost more like a festival. What's the thought behind that? And are you going to, and what's the plan? Is it a plan to keep doing them, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we just had, was it our 16th or 17th last year? It really started by a small group under Bill Tishner, who many know in the SEMA community. And, it just grew out of the want and need to be closer to our enthusiast customer and really to celebrate what enthusiasts do and give them a place to show off their vehicles. And I tell you, the first time I went to LS Fest, so it would have been September 23, I was blown away because what I expected, you hear Holley and you're thinking carburetors, you're thinking older cars, you're thinking, people later in their years, just at a car show or something. And what I found was just completely different. Yeah, there's car show and things like that, but the amount of diversity, the amount of youth there, and just high octane, from the drifting to the drag racing to the engagement by the community, and just how appreciative they had a place to either run their car or see others run their car and get inspiration from what others were doing. It's just incredible. We'll have 40,000 plus people. We end up doing through our events close to, or just over 100,000 people of all the events we're doing. And just in Bowling Green alone, we'll have 40,000 people. And so for us, it's a way just to stay close to the customer. It's a way for us to, in some regards, give back. We're doing a lot more focus groups there, getting direct product information. The team just loves it. Being out of the office, talking to our customers, like there's no better day.
That's cool. I love that. I knew you guys had something special about 6-7 years ago. A guy I went to high school with who he's a tool and die maker now, and he's had a bunch of cool cars. He built a vehicle specifically for LS Fest. Mm-hmm. And it's like this, it looks like this crappy Mazda B2200 from the early 90s. It looks like a little Gardner truck. And he left stock steel wheels on it that he widened, lowered it, put in a twin turbo LS motor, and permanently bolted a lawnmower into the bed so that it literally looks like a landscaper's truck.
Oh, no kidding.
And he took it to LS Fest to autocross it. And I asked him, I said, why did you build this thing? He's like, because that event's so cool. I just wanted to show up with something weird enough that I would stand out. Yeah. And I'm like, man, if you're spending that kind of time and treasure just to go to one show, that's got to be a pretty powerful show. That's pretty neat.
Yeah. It's amazing the hard work our enthusiasts put in and show up there. And, you see a lot of the same folks year after year, sometimes with different cars there. Like you said, they get one project and then sell it and move on to another. But what we're working on is continuing to replicate that formula that's so successful in American performance. We want to start offering more and more of those experiences to other verticals. And the Euro team has had events in the past. We're doing more of those. We're going to start doing more things around truck and off-road. And we did some things relative to our Ford Fest, more off-road tracks. And we feature some off-road at LS Fest too. And then safety and racing, we want to figure that out over time. But we just think it's a great way to stay engaged with our enthusiasts and be authentic.
I like that. Matt, as we kind of wind the conversation down, I had a couple of leadership questions I wanted to ask you about. And having led, public companies, turnarounds, large organizations across multiple industries, as you sit there as CEO of Holley today, what have you learned about leadership that you wish you understood earlier in your career?
That's a tough question. Ultimately, Dan, it all comes down to the team you assemble. Uh, I mean, there's no one person that's going to drive an organization forward. It has to be a collective effort. So getting the right people and then making sure it's not just the team you have, but making sure layers down below, because really where good ideas go to die kind of is like middle management, right? And I mean ideas from the front line, ideas from they get bogged down in there, right? If people don't feel empowered, if someone on the one of our assembly lines has an idea and then it gets escalated, like we got to make sure that flows up and it gets supported. And so how do you create an organization where people have a voice, feel empowered, and you're making it easy for them to get that known and get support to get that done, right? So that's the secret. It's not easy. It really isn't. And but if you can, there's never perfection in that art. But if you can just have that mindset of, servant leadership mindset, how do you support the people on the front line, either talking with our customers or working in our facilities, or developing great products? How do you support them in that servant leadership mindset, and how do you take out the obstacles? And when I say I say good ideas go to die. It's not that there's bad people by any means in the middle management or those middle layers. They get stuck if there's not the right kind of lanes and structure for them to be able to communicate what needs to be done.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So is it sort of giving them the opportunity, so the people beneath them, giving them the opportunity to kind of communicate up, but also giving those middle management layer people an avenue to sort of have enough autonomy to operate, but also not empowering them to just sort of let things park and die there, but encouraging
Yeah.
that change. That's interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask, Matt, is, Holley is in a unique position within the industry because the automotive aftermarket is very insular. It is in some ways kind of a gossipy, for a multi-billion dollar industry, it's a relatively tight-knit group of people.
Yeah.
And when you're the big dog, when you're the biggest group in the industry, I think a lot of people look to you to say, okay, what are these guys doing? Is this good? Is this bad? Are things good? Are things bad? What's the economy like? How's business? Where do you see all this going? Where do you think we're headed as an industry? Where do you think Holley is headed? Is there just kind of an endless golden road ahead of us? Are there things we need to be aware of? What would you say to the people around you at the SEMA show about, hey, here's where I think we're all going, and here's what I think we need to be aware of?
Boy, you asked some deep questions, Dan. Let me unpack this one. So just on the macro trends, the enthusiasts are going to choose what route they want to be met at, right? So I think that's very important for our industry to realize it is changing quickly, right? And of course e-commerce has been around for a long time, but really that COVID period really changed the way that people are like, generally speaking, online first, and then if I have to, I'll go to the store, right? And so you see third party marketplaces, um, you see different ways customers are coming to find products in our industry. And I think just as an industry, we have to all evolve and appreciate that and figure out how we work all cohesively in this omni-channel environment, right? It's very important. And I'm so thankful for our B2B partners. Like we've spent a lot of time over the last 3 years, working closely with their B2B partners. And I tell them like there's tons of growth for us all. Like we're going to work together, but I think as an industry we got to figure this all out. How this omni-channel evolves, and also to the advent of AI. I mean, it is. I, in my nearly 30 years of work, I've never seen something be so dynamic in driving the changes in how we work. And it's not just how we're working; it's how is that consumer then finding the parts? How do we make it easier? How do we serve that consumer through that lens of AI they're going to use? Like, there's just so much as an industry we have to think about there.
That is not where I thought you would go, and that is super interesting because I think you're right. You're right. I mean that even applies to me personally. Coming out of 2020, I think we are now online shopping first. My front porch is ridiculous. It's like every day now. We got my wife is
Yeah.
a big Jeff Bezos supporter apparently, but you're right, and I think even there was sort of a challenge temporarily as the print media kind of went away and people were trying to figure out, especially in our industry, how do I figure out the brands or the products that I want to buy, what fits my vehicle. I think SEMA did a real service to the industry with their kind of data co-op and sort of standardizing fitment data and application data and all that, but it hadn't quite matured yet. Like the data was now uniform, but how do we help people find those parts? And you're absolutely right. I mean, I use AI now for things I never 2 years ago would have used it for. Well, literally just to go voice to chat and say, hey, I need this part for my truck. What do I do? And it'll just say, buy this. Here's the link. And just within ChatGPT now, you can make purchases. It's incredible. So you're
Yeah.
right. Coming together sort of as an industry to sort of figure out how to uniformly embrace that is important.
Yeah. So I think, so just continuing kind of with the macro, there's that omni-channel thing that's really, evolved 5+ years. And now it's just accelerating the change with the AI, advent of AI coming on. I think the other thing is, when I look at the industry and emissions, I think under Mike Spagnola and the team there at SEMA, that, really getting some good traction, bringing up the importance of our industry, also the emission compliance. I don't think that's going away. I know the ebbs and flows with the administration, but we all have to do the right things, right? And if it's race only, great, it's race only. But if it's not race only, like how does that all work, and how do we all kind of stay true to that and make sure the industry continues to have a great reputation, right? We never want to get in a position where I think a few years back, a few bad actors were really causing a spotlight here on something that didn't need to happen, because generally speaking, 90+% of the industry, wants to do the right thing. So I think we just always got to be mindful of that. So like those are two big things that, we talk about a lot, is just meeting the consumer where they want to be met. How do we continue to offer that lifestyle platform to engage them? How do we include our B2B partners in serving them? That's complementary. And how do we, work together to serve that enthusiast? Then how do we always, make great innovative products that are doing the right thing and meeting the emission standards and the applicability there? So that's kind of what I think about a couple on kind of more of the maybe the macro type factors in the industry. I think then also when you bring up the industry, it has consolidated, but also too, I see a ton of great companies that are 3 years old, 5 years old, that are following new trends, that are doing really cool things. So I think the natural advent, you'll still have consolidation, but I don't know how much that consolidation is going to push past a lot of the great new companies that are popping up every day, finding unmet needs for the consumer and making things happen on new platforms and everything. So, but there'll always be folks that, don't necessarily have a succession plan or decide they want to do something else and have great companies and they'll want to sell them. And, we in the market are good, as you probably saw in a recent announcements. We're getting back into M&A, and we just brought into the family HRX, which is an amazing complementary European racing suit that's selling globally. Our Simpson suits are more of that American style. HRX is more of the kind of the Euro FIA, kind of fit and certification, and it's very complementary to our Stilo brand, which is high end helmets. And so, we love these entrepreneur led brands to come in our portfolio. And for us, the key is how do we keep that passion and that founder and that great team doing what they do, and us continue to support that, but also help them unlock growth with either more capital or access to our distribution or marketing resources. So I see that trend continuing to happen in the industry. Maybe not as I think just the nature of the capital markets from roughly 2010 to 2022, there was a lot of money at low cost, and I think you saw accelerated consolidations. I don't think you're necessarily going to see at that level, but you'll naturally can see some consolidation in the industry. And then, did I cover most of your topics in that question? I'm thinking I'm missing one
No,
here.
that was great. That was really in depth, and I appreciate it. Well, I know we're kind of running short on time, but the one other question I wanted to ask, Matt, is one I ask everybody. Unfortunately, the way I learn is through the School of Hard Knocks. That's just how I'm wired. Try something, half the time I screw it up, learn from it, and vow not to repeat that mistake again. So that's kind of been my arc. So something I always ask leaders is if you look back on your career, what's the biggest mistake you made in business, and what did you learn from it?
I think there's a time and place for certain styles of leadership, Dan. And I think, when you're in a firefight, there's one style of leadership. If you're kind of neutral, there's one. If you're in growth mode, there's another. Or however you want to frame it, right? Like, not everything's a nail and everything can't be a hammer.
I like
right?
it.
And so how do you adjust your approach? No, and I'm talking about me. How do you adjust your approach, to the team you have, to the scenario, and then, how do you work to, empower that team? So I think for me, it's when you take these roles, and, I'm just so fortunate to be part of Holley. Like, we've done so much in 3 years, and how we started this journey versus where we are now is very different. And you got to think back. Have you changed your approach along the way, right? And so, that's something I'm even thinking about a lot right now. And so you just gotta constantly evolve your approach and understand where the situation is.
Yeah, I think that's smart. So it's never sort of rinse and repeat doesn't work, I guess would be a way to kind of summarize that. It's constantly reassess, reevaluate, and modify to suit. Interesting. Well, Matt, this was a great conversation. Really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, your leadership philosophy, your vision for Holley, and even where car culture in general is going. For people who want to learn more about Holley's brands, everything you guys have going on, where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah. Of course, you can just go to Holley.com or, one of our many social platforms, and but Holley.com will get you to all our brands. And, you can see the platform and kind of pick your lane. If you're a Euro enthusiast, you like trucks, if you're on the track or riding a motorcycle, or you love American performance cars, we got you covered.
That's awesome. Matt, really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Take care.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of Only the Strong Survive. Please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with someone who'd enjoy it. Thanks again to Matt Stevenson for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.